The CEO was crying, not in her corner office, not behind closed doors, right there in the center of the restaurant, mascara streaking down her porcelain face, diamond earrings catching the dim light as her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Ethan Cole stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still on the glass, every instinct screaming at him to turn around and leave. This blind date was already a disaster, and he hadn't even sat down yet. His sister meant well, but he wasn't ready. He'd never be ready. 3 years since Sarah died, and the weight of her absence still crushed him every single morning. But something made him stay. Maybe it was the way the woman's fingers trembled around her wine glass. Maybe it was recognizing that particular brand of loneliness, the kind that hollows you out from the inside. Or maybe he was just tired of running. He took a step forward, then another, and when she finally looked up, her red-rimmed eyes meeting his across the candlelit room, Ethan's entire world ground to a halt. Because he knew that face. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries. The woman whose signature appeared on his paychecks. The untouchable executive who walked through the office floors like she owned the air itself. Because she did. She'd never looked at him twice in 4 years, never knew his name, never saw him. Until tonight. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're already hooked, hit that like button. Trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end. The reservation was for 7:30. Ethan arrived at 7:45, and even that felt too early. He'd spent 20 minutes sitting in his car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince himself this wasn't a betrayal. Sarah wouldn't want him frozen in grief forever. She'd told him as much, in those final weeks when her voice had grown soft, and her hand in his had felt like paper. "Promise me you'll let yourself be happy again," she'd whispered. He'd promised. But promises made in hospital rooms under fluorescent lights carried a different weight than promises kept in the real world, where every laugh felt like theft and every moment of peace was shadowed by guilt. His sister Emma had set this up 3 weeks ago, cornering him after Lily's 7th birthday party with that look she got when she'd already made up her mind. "You can't keep living like this, Ethan." "Like what?" "Like a ghost. You go to work, you come home, you tuck Lily in, and then you sit in that house like you're waiting for something that's never coming back." Emma had gripped his arm, her voice softening. "Sarah loved you. She wouldn't want you disappearing into nothing." "I'm not disappearing. I'm raising our daughter." "You're surviving. That's not the same as living." She'd pulled out her phone, showing him a photo of a woman with kind eyes and dark hair. "Her name is Victoria. She's successful, smart, and she's been through loss too. Just one dinner, Ethan. If it's awful, you never have to do it again. But you owe it to yourself, and to Lily, to at least try." He'd agreed mostly to make Emma stop talking. One dinner. He could survive one dinner. Now walking through the entrance of Marcello's, a restaurant far fancier than anywhere he'd normally go, Ethan felt every bit the imposter. His shirt was clean but old, pressed carefully that morning while Lily ate cereal and asked why Daddy was dressing up. His shoes were scuffed. The watch on his wrist had been Sarah's last gift to him, the leather band worn soft from years of wear. The hostess smiled at him with practiced warmth. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "Cole. Table for 2. She checked her tablet, then gestured toward the main dining room. "Right this way." That's when he saw her. The woman from Emma's photo, Victoria, sat alone at a corner table, her back straight, her hands folded on the white tablecloth. But something was wrong. Even from across the room, Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw was clenched tight. Then she lifted one hand to her face, and he realized she was crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Quiet, restrained tears that she kept trying to wipe away, glancing around as if hoping no one would notice. But her composure was cracking piece by piece, and Ethan watched as she finally gave up pretending, pressing her palms against her eyes as her shoulders began to shake. The hostess was still walking, oblivious. "Your table is just—" "I see it," Ethan said quietly. "Thank you." She left him there, and for a long moment, Ethan considered turning around. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know what had broken her. And he sure as hell wasn't equipped to fix anyone else when he could barely hold himself together. But then Victoria dropped her hands, reaching for her wine glass with trembling fingers, and the light caught her face fully. Ethan's breath stopped. He knew her, not from Emma's photo, from work. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, the manufacturing company where Ethan had worked for the past 4 years as a project engineer. The woman whose face appeared in quarterly newsletters and company-wide emails. The executive who walked through the production floors twice a year with an entourage of assistants, never making eye contact with anyone below director level. She had no idea who he was. Why would she? Hale Industries employed over 3,000 people. Ethan was a number on a spreadsheet, a name on an org chart she'd never seen, and now she was his blind date. The universe, Ethan thought distantly, had a twisted sense of humor. He should leave. This was Emma's mistake. She couldn't have known who Victoria was. Couldn't have known that setting her brother up with his own CEO was crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. He could text Emma later, explain the situation, and they'd laugh about it over coffee. But Victoria looked up then, her tear-streaked face turning toward him as if she sensed his presence, and their eyes met. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Victoria's expression shifted, confusion melting into something like panic. She recognized him too. Maybe not his name, maybe not his face exactly, but enough to know he worked for her. Enough to realize this wasn't just awkward, it was impossible. Ethan made his decision. He walked to the table. "Victoria?" His voice came out steadier than he felt. She stared at him, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Her lips parted in surprise. You're Ethan?" "Yeah." He pulled out the chair across from her but didn't sit yet. "And you're my boss." A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Oh, no, this can't." She covered her face with both hands. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Emma didn't tell me. I didn't know you worked at Hale." "She didn't know either," Ethan said quietly. "It's not her fault." Victoria dropped her hands, looking at him with raw, exhausted eyes. "This is mortifying. You crying or me seeing it?" "Both." She grabbed her purse from the seat beside her. "I should go. This was a terrible idea from the start. And now—" "Wait." She froze, her fingers tight around the leather strap. Ethan didn't know why he'd said it. Didn't know why he was still standing there instead of walking away. But something in her expression stopped him cold. It was the same look he saw in his own mirror every morning, the hollow exhaustion of someone who'd been holding themselves together for far too long. "You don't have to go," he said. "I'm your boss. This is completely inappropriate." "Yeah, it is." Ethan pulled out the chair and sat down. "But you're also a person who clearly had a bad day, and I drove 40 minutes to get here, so I'm at least having dinner." Victoria stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You can't be serious. I'm starving, and unless you're planning to fire me for sitting at the same table, I don't see the harm." He picked up the menu, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Besides, you already know the worst thing about me." "What's that?" "I'm the guy who showed up late to a blind date and made his boss cry." That startled a short, choked laugh out of her. It wasn't much, but it was something. She set her purse down slowly, her hands still shaking. "I wasn't crying because of you," she said quietly. "I know. You don't know anything about me." Ethan met her gaze across the table. "I know you're sitting in a restaurant on a Friday night crying into expensive wine because someone thought you needed a blind date as much as I did. So yeah, I don't know your story, but I know loneliness when I see it." The words hung between them, sharp and true. Victoria's eyes glistened with fresh tears, but she blinked them back, her jaw tightening. "You shouldn't talk to me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm human." Ethan set the menu down. "Aren't you?" She looked at him for a long time, and something in her expression cracked. Not broke, just cracked, enough to let a sliver of truth slip through. "I don't remember anymore," she whispered. A waiter appeared then, impeccably timed and oblivious to the tension. "Good evening. Can I start you with drinks? Or would you like a moment?" Ethan glanced at Victoria. Her wine glass was nearly empty, and her hands had finally stopped trembling. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "2 more of whatever she's having," Ethan said, "and we'll need a few minutes with the menu." "Of course." The waiter vanished. Victoria exhaled slowly, pressing her fingers against her temples. "This is insane. Completely." We should both leave right now and pretend this never happened. Probably. She looked up at him, and for the first time there was the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. But you're not leaving, are you? Not unless you tell me to. The smile faded, replaced by something softer and sadder. I've been telling people what to do for so long, I forgot what it's like when someone just stays. Ethan understood that. After Sarah died, people had surrounded him for months. Friends, family, coworkers bringing casseroles and condolences. But eventually, they drifted away. Life moved on for everyone else. Only Ethan stayed frozen, caught in the moment when everything shattered. Then I'll stay, he said simply. Victoria nodded, picking up her wine glass and draining the last swallow. When she set it down, her eyes were clear, the tears finally gone. I need to know something first. Okay? Why did you come tonight? Emma said you didn't want to. Ethan hesitated. The truth felt too heavy, too personal. But if they were doing this, whatever this was, then honesty seemed like the only place to start. My wife died 3 years ago, he said quietly. Cancer, stage 4. We had 8 months from diagnosis to the end. He swallowed hard. I haven't been on a date since, haven't wanted to, but my sister thinks I'm wasting my life, and my daughter deserves a father who's more than just going through the motions. So I came because I made a promise, not to Emma, to Sarah, that I'd try to keep living. Victoria's expression softened into something that looked like understanding. And how's that going? Ask me after dessert. This time her smile was real. The waiter returned with their drinks, and they ordered food neither of them would remember later. As the restaurant hummed with conversation around them, Ethan and Victoria sat across from each other, a grieving widower and a lonely CEO, and began the strangest conversation of their lives. Tell me something true, Victoria said after a long sip of wine. Not the corporate answer. Not what you think I want to hear. Something real. Ethan considered the question. I'm terrified every single day that I'm failing my daughter, that I'm not enough, that she'll grow up and realize I was just pretending to have my life together. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. That's honest. You asked for true. I did. She set her glass down, her fingers tracing the stem. My turn? Fair's fair. She took a breath. I have everything anyone could want: money, power, respect. I run a company my father built from nothing. I make decisions that affect thousands of lives, and I am so unbearably lonely that some nights I sit in my penthouse and wonder what the point of any of it is. Her voice cracked. I can't remember the last time someone looked at me and saw Victoria, not the CEO, not the Hale legacy, just me. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. I see you. You don't even know me. Maybe that's why. They stared at each other across the table, and for a moment the restaurant faded away. No titles, no grief, no expectations, just two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. This is crazy, Victoria murmured. You already said that. It bears repeating. Their food arrived. Salmon for her, steak for him. And they ate slowly, conversation flowing easier now. Victoria asked about Lily, and Ethan found himself talking about his daughter in ways he rarely did. The way she hummed while drawing, her obsession with space and dinosaurs, how she still slept with the stuffed rabbit Sarah had given her the day she was born. She sounds wonderful, Victoria said softly. She is. She's the only reason I'm still standing. That's a lot of weight for a 7-year-old to carry. Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? You're living for her, not for yourself. Victoria's gaze was gentle but unflinching. I understand why, but eventually she'll feel that pressure. She'll know she's the only thing keeping you going, and that's not fair to either of you. The words hit harder than Ethan expected, because she was right. He'd built his entire existence around Lily, telling himself it was love, that it was enough. But it wasn't living, it was surviving. So what do I do? He asked quietly. You find something that's yours, something that makes you want to wake up in the morning, even on the days when being a father feels impossible. She paused. You find a reason to live that isn't someone else's heartbeat. Ethan set his fork down. And have you found that? Victoria's smile was bitter. No. That's how I know what it looks like when it's missing. They fell silent, and the weight of their shared understanding settled over the table like a blanket. Two people who'd lost themselves in different ways, sitting together in a restaurant neither belonged in, telling truths they'd never said aloud. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Depends on the question." "What made you cry tonight before I got here?" Victoria looked away, her jaw tight. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Today is my father's birthday. He died 2 years ago, and I inherited everything he built. The company, the responsibility, the legacy." She met Ethan's eyes. "Everyone tells me I'm doing an incredible job, that he'd be proud, but I don't feel proud. I feel like I'm drowning. And tonight, sitting here waiting for a stranger my assistant set me up with because she's worried I'm too isolated, I realized something." "What?" "I have no one, no real friends, no family left. Just employees and board members and people who want something from me." Her voice broke. "I came to this dinner because I was desperate enough to hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could see past all of it. And then you walked in, and I realized you're one of my employees too, and I felt so stupid for even trying." Ethan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "I'm not here as your employee." "Then what are you here as?" "Someone who gets it." Victoria stared at his hand, then slowly, carefully placed hers over it. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. "This is inappropriate," she whispered. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Does it matter?" She looked up at him, and in her eyes, Ethan saw the same question he'd been asking himself for 3 years. What's the point of doing everything right when nothing feels right anymore? "No," Victoria said softly. "It doesn't." They stayed like that, hands clasped across the table, while the restaurant moved around them. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, the loneliness felt just a little less heavy. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu they shared without thinking about it, the conversation had shifted again. Lighter now. Victoria told him about her disastrous attempt to learn piano last year. Ethan described Lily's recent science fair project, which involved a volcano that accidentally set off the school's fire alarm. "You're a good father," Victoria said, her spoon pausing over the tiramisu. "The way you talk about her, she's lucky to have you." "I don't always feel like a good father." "That's how I know you are one. The bad ones never doubt themselves." Ethan smiled despite himself. "You're very wise for someone who doesn't remember how to be human." "I have my moments." The check came, and Ethan reached for it automatically. Victoria's hand shot out faster. "Absolutely not." "I can pay for dinner." "I'm sure you can, but I'm the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and you're—" She trailed off, realizing what she was about to say. "An underpaid engineer?" Ethan finished dryly. Victoria winced. "I was going to say my guest. But yes, also that. Then let me get the tip." She considered, then nodded. "Deal." They split it awkwardly, both too aware of the power imbalance that had temporarily dissolved over wine and confessions. Outside, the night air was cool, and the parking lot stretched between them like a question neither knew how to answer. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For staying. For not running when you realized who I was. Thank you for not firing me when you realized who I was." She laughed, a real laugh this time, and it transformed her face. "I'll try to restrain myself on Monday. Appreciated." They stood there, neither moving toward their cars. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd said too much, and somehow not enough. "Ethan?" Victoria's voice was soft. "Yeah?" "Do you think... would it be completely insane if we..." She stopped, shaking her head. "Never mind, forget I said anything." But Ethan knew what she was asking, because he was thinking it too. "It would be insane," he said carefully. "Completely inappropriate. Probably a terrible idea." "Right, of course. But I'd like to see you again anyway." Victoria's eyes snapped to his, wide and uncertain. "You would?" "I would. Not as your employee, not because our sisters set us up, just because I haven't felt this present in 3 years, and I think you might understand what that means." She nodded slowly, something like hope flickering across her features. "I do understand." "So maybe we're both crazy." "Maybe we are." They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling with phones, the gesture feeling both monumental and absurd. When they finally said goodnight and walked to their separate cars, Ethan sat in his driver's seat for a long time, staring at Victoria's name in his contacts. He'd gone to dinner expecting nothing, hoping for nothing. And somehow, he'd found someone who looked at his grief and didn't flinch. Someone who understood that loneliness wasn't something you fixed with platitudes and pity. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "I'm glad you stayed." Ethan smiled, typing back quickly. "Me too." He drove home through empty streets, and for the first time in 3 years, the silence in his car didn't feel suffocating. It felt like possibility. When he got home, Lily was already asleep, and the babysitter reported no problems. Ethan paid her, locked the door, and stood in his dark living room, Sarah's photo still on the mantel where it had been since the funeral. "I met someone tonight," he whispered to the picture. "I don't know what it means. I don't know if I'm ready, but I think you'd tell me it's okay to find out." The photo didn't answer. It never did. But somewhere across the city, Victoria Hale sat in her penthouse, staring at her phone, feeling something she thought was gone forever. Hope. And in the space between them, between grief and loneliness, between employee and CEO, between two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage, something new began to take shape. Something neither of them had dared to imagine. A second chance. The weekend passed in a strange blur of normalcy and anticipation. Ethan took Lily to the park on Saturday, pushed her on the swings until his arms ached, and tried not to check his phone every 5 minutes. Victoria texted him twice, once to say good morning, once to share a photo of her coffee with the caption, "Trying to remember what weekends are for." He'd responded with the picture of Lily's latest dinosaur drawing, and Victoria had replied with a string of impressed emojis that made him smile despite himself. Sunday evening, after Lily was tucked in and the house fell quiet, Ethan sat at his kitchen table and stared at his laptop screen. Monday was coming. In less than 12 hours, he'd walk back into Hale Industries as the same project engineer he'd been for 4 years. Except now his CEO had held his hand across a restaurant table and told him secrets she'd never told anyone else. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, are you panicking about tomorrow?" Ethan exhaled a laugh and typed back. "Ethan, is it that obvious?" Victoria, "I'm panicking too, if that helps." Ethan, "It does, actually." Victoria, "We don't have to make this complicated. At work, we're professional. Nothing changes." Ethan, "And outside of work?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, her response came through. Victoria, "Outside of work, we figure it out as we go." Ethan set his phone down, a knot of tension loosening in his chest. She was right. They didn't need to have all the answers tonight. They just needed to show up and see what happened next. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of weather that matched Ethan's nervous energy perfectly. He dropped Lily off at school, kissed her forehead, and watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing. Then he drove to Hale Industries, parked in his usual spot 3 rows from the back, and walked through the employee entrance like he had 1,000 times before. The engineering department was on the 3rd floor, a sprawling open office filled with cubicles, whiteboards covered in equations, and the constant hum of computers. Ethan's desk was in the middle of the floor, surrounded by colleagues he'd worked with for years but never quite connected with. They were friendly enough, but surface level. No one asked about his life. No one knew about Sarah, about Lily, about the weight he carried every single day. He settled into his chair, booted up his computer, and tried to focus on the project timeline in front of him. A new manufacturing process for aerospace components. Weeks of work, hundreds of calculations, endless revisions. Important, technically challenging, and utterly invisible to anyone above middle management. "Morning, Cole." Ethan looked up. His manager, Derek Voss, stood at the edge of his cubicle with a coffee cup in one hand and his usual expression of vague irritation. Derek was in his mid-40s, prematurely balding, and had mastered the art of taking credit for other people's work while contributing nothing himself. "Morning," Ethan said evenly. "Got a minute? Need to talk about the quarterly review." Ethan saved his work and followed Derek to one of the small conference rooms off the main floor. Derek shut the door and sat down heavily, setting his coffee on the table with a thud. "So here's the thing," Derek began, not bothering with pleasantries. Your performance this quarter has been adequate. Adequate. The word landed like a slap. Ethan had spent the last 3 months redesigning an entire production line, cutting costs by 18% while improving output quality. He'd done the work of 3 engineers, stayed late more nights than he could count, and delivered results ahead of schedule. Adequate, Ethan repeated flatly. Don't take it personally. Budget's tight this year. Everyone's getting similar reviews. Derek leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming on the armrest. Besides, you've been distracted lately. Everyone's noticed. Distracted how? Coming in late, leaving early. I get it. Single parent, things are tough. But the company can't make exceptions just because you've got personal issues. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd been late exactly twice in 6 months, both times because Lily's school had called with emergencies. And he'd made up every single minute of lost time. I've met every deadline you've given me, Ethan said carefully. My work speaks for itself. Derek waved a hand dismissively. Sure, look, I'm not saying you're doing a bad job. I'm saying you're doing an adequate job. That's not a criticism, it's just reality. Maybe next quarter you step it up a bit, show some real initiative, and we can talk about better numbers. Translation. Derek had no intention of giving Ethan credit for anything, because that would mean admitting someone beneath him was more competent than he was. Ethan stood up, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Is that all? That's all. Keep up the adequate work, Cole. Ethan left the conference room before he said something he'd regret. He walked back to his desk, sat down, and stared at his monitor without seeing it. Adequate. 3 months of excellence reduced to a single dismissive word because his manager was too insecure to acknowledge actual talent. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Victoria. Victoria, how's your morning going? Ethan almost laughed. He typed back quickly. Ethan, just got told my work is adequate. Yours? Victoria, about to walk into a board meeting where people will smile at me and lie for 2 hours. Want to run away together? Ethan, tempting. Where would we go? Victoria, somewhere without performance reviews and quarterly earnings reports. Ethan, sounds perfect. Victoria, hang in there, I'll see you soon. Ethan frowned at the screen. See you soon? What did that mean? He didn't have to wait long to find out. At 11 o'clock, the entire engineering department received an email from executive administration. Mandatory all-hands meeting in conference room A at 11:30. No agenda provided, no explanation. The rumor mill started immediately. Layoffs, some whispered. Restructuring. Budget cuts. Ethan ignored the speculation and kept working, but his stomach twisted with unease. Mandatory meetings were never good news. At 11:25, he joined the stream of engineers heading toward the conference room on the 5th floor. Conference room A was the largest in the building, normally reserved for major presentations and high-level strategy sessions. By the time Ethan arrived, the room was already packed, people standing along the walls when the chairs filled up. Derek stood near the front, arms crossed, looking annoyed. Ethan found a spot near the back and waited. At exactly 11:30, the door opened and Victoria Hale walked in. The room went silent. She wore a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back, her expression composed and unreadable. Behind her walked 2 members of the executive team and someone Ethan recognized from human resources. Victoria moved to the front of the room with the easy confidence of someone who owned every space she entered. Her eyes swept across the crowd, pausing for the briefest moment when they landed on Ethan. Then she looked away, her face betraying nothing. Good morning, Victoria said, her voice calm and commanding. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I'll keep this brief. She turned to the presentation screen behind her, where a single slide appeared, operational review and restructuring. A ripple of anxiety moved through the room. Over the past month, Victoria continued, I've been conducting a detailed review of our engineering operations. Performance metrics, project outcomes, resource allocation. She paused. What I found was unacceptable. Derek shifted uncomfortably near the front. Ethan's pulse quickened. This department produces some of the most innovative work in the industry, Victoria said, her tone sharpening. But that work is being buried. Credit is being misattributed. Talented engineers are being overlooked while mediocrity is rewarded. Her gaze swept the room again. That ends today. She clicked to the next slide. A list of names appeared. Ethan's heart stopped when he saw Derek Voss at the top. Effective immediately, the following managers are being removed from their positions, Victoria said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Derek Voss, Michael Chen, Patricia Lawson. You'll meet with HR after this meeting to discuss your transitions. Derek's face went white. You can't be serious. Victoria turned to him, her expression ice cold. I'm completely serious. Your performance reviews have consistently undervalued your team's contributions while inflating your own. You've created a culture of stagnation and favoritism. This company doesn't have room for that anymore. This is outrageous, Derek sputtered. I've been here for 12 years, and in 12 years you've managed to take credit for hundreds of hours of work you didn't do. Victoria's voice didn't rise, but it filled the room like a physical force. Security will escort you out once we're done here. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but the HR representative stepped forward with a folder, and he went silent, his face red with fury. Victoria clicked to the next slide. New leadership structure. Several of you will be promoted to fill these positions, she said. Promotions will be based on merit, project outcomes, and peer evaluations. Not seniority, not politics. Results. She listed 3 names. None of them were people Ethan knew well, but all of them were engineers who actually did the work, who stayed late and solved impossible problems without fanfare. Then Victoria paused, her gaze finding Ethan across the room. There's one more change I want to announce, she said quietly. A new senior project lead position is being created to oversee our aerospace division. This person will report directly to the VP of Engineering and will have full authority over project direction and resource allocation. Ethan's breath caught. The position is being offered to Ethan Cole. The room erupted in murmurs. Heads turned toward Ethan, eyes wide with shock. He stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just heard. Victoria's expression remained neutral, professional. Ethan's work on the aerospace manufacturing redesign reduced costs by 18% while improving quality benchmarks across the board. His solutions are innovative, his execution is flawless, and his contributions have been consistently undervalued. She paused. If he accepts, he'll start next Monday. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't speak. Across the room, Victoria met his eyes, and for just a second, he saw the faintest hint of warmth beneath her professional mask. Then she looked away, addressing the room again. That's all. Thank you for your time. If you have questions, HR will be available this afternoon. She left the room with the same brisk efficiency she'd entered with, her entourage following. The door closed, and chaos broke out immediately. People talking over each other, Derek shouting at the HR rep, someone congratulating Ethan with a clap on his shoulder that he barely felt. Ethan pushed through the crowd and walked out into the hallway, his mind racing. A promotion, a senior lead position, reporting to the VP. It was everything he'd wanted for years, everything Derek had blocked at every turn, and Victoria had just handed it to him in front of the entire department. He found her in the executive elevator lobby, alone, her back to him as she waited for the doors to open. Victoria. She turned, her professional mask slipping just slightly. Ethan, what did you just do? I promoted the person who deserved it. You fired my manager and gave me his job in front of 100 people. I fired a manager who was stealing credit and stifling talent. Your promotion is separate. Her voice was calm, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Did I overstep? I don't know, Ethan said honestly. Did you do this because of Friday night? Victoria's expression hardened. I did this because I spent the last month reviewing every project file in this building, and your name appeared on work that Derek claimed as his own. I did this because you're brilliant, and you've been invisible for 4 years. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Friday night reminded me what it's like to see people clearly. But this decision? It's business, Ethan. You earned it. The elevator doors opened. Victoria stepped inside, then held the door with her hand, waiting. Are you accepting the position? She asked quietly. Ethan looked at her. This woman who'd cried in a restaurant, who'd held his hand and told him her secrets, who was now standing in front of him as the CEO who'd just changed his life. Yes, he said. I'm accepting. Something like relief flickered across her face. Good. HR will send you the details this afternoon. The doors started to close. Ethan caught them. Victoria, wait. She looked at him, and for a moment they weren't CEO and employee. They were just two people standing in an elevator lobby trying to figure out what they were doing. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. Don't thank me. Just do the work. But her eyes softened. And maybe we can talk later? Outside of work? I'd like that. The doors closed and she was gone. Ethan stood there for a long moment, his heart pounding, his mind spinning. Then he pulled out his phone and called his sister. Emma answered on the second ring. How did it go? Did you survive the blind date? Emma, Ethan said, his voice shaking slightly. I need to tell you something. Oh no, was she awful? I'm so sorry, I thought, she's my boss. Silence. What? Victoria Hale, the woman you set me up with. She's the CEO of my company. Oh my God, Emma's voice rose in pitch. Ethan, I had no idea, I swear. I just knew she was successful and kind and, oh my God, did you get fired? No, I got promoted. Another silence, longer this time. Explain, Emma said slowly. Right now. Everything. Ethan told her. The dinner, the conversation, the tears and the confessions, the weekend texts, and then this morning, Derek's dismissal, the announcement, the promotion that changed everything. When he finished, Emma was quiet for a long moment. So let me get this straight, she said finally. You went on a blind date with your CEO, had some kind of emotional breakthrough together, and now she's promoted you to a senior position? Yes. And you're going to see her again outside of work? I think so. Ethan, Emma's voice was gentle now. Are you sure you know what you're doing? No, Ethan admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing, but for the first time in 3 years, I want to find out. Emma sighed, but there was warmth in it. Okay, just be careful. I want you to be happy, I really do, but this sounds complicated. It is, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it is, Emma agreed. I love you, you know that? I know, love you too. He hung up and walked back to his desk in a daze. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations from colleagues he barely knew, thinly veiled resentment from people who'd wanted the position themselves, and an overwhelming sense that his life had just tilted on its axis. At 5 o'clock, his phone buzzed. Victoria. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks east of the office. Neutral territory. Meet me there at 6? Ethan. I'll be there. The coffee shop was small and quiet. The kind of place where freelancers typed on laptops and students studied in corners. Ethan arrived first, ordered a black coffee, and sat at a table near the window. His leg bounced nervously under the table. Victoria walked in at 6:03, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual tailored suits. She looked younger like this, less untouchable. She ordered tea and sat down across from him, her hands wrapping around the warm cup. Hi, she said softly. Hi. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the day pressing down between them. I didn't mean to blindside you this morning, Victoria said finally. I knew I was going to restructure the department, but I didn't plan to announce your promotion in front of everyone. It just felt right in the moment. It was right, Ethan said. Derek's been burying my work for years. I just never thought anyone noticed. I noticed. Her eyes met his. The question is, are you angry? Do you think I did this because of Friday? Ethan considered the question carefully. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe part of me wonders, but the bigger part knows you wouldn't risk your reputation on something that wasn't justified. You're too smart for that. Victoria's shoulders relaxed slightly. I spent the last month reviewing performance data because something felt wrong in that department. The numbers didn't match the outcomes. When I dug deeper, I found pattern after pattern of managers taking credit, suppressing talent, protecting mediocrity. She leaned forward. You weren't the only one being overlooked, Ethan, but you were the most egregious example. And yes, meeting you on Friday made me look harder. It made me ask questions I should have been asking all along. So what happens now? Now you do the job you were always capable of doing. You report to Linda Chen, the VP of Engineering. She's brilliant and fair. You'll like her. Victoria paused. And outside of work, We see if this thing between us is real or just two lonely people finding each other at the right time. Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I think it's real. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, but I know what I felt on Friday, and I know I haven't felt that in a long time. Victoria's fingers curled around his. This is going to be complicated. People will talk. They'll assume I promoted you because of personal reasons. Let them talk. I'll prove I earned it. And if it doesn't work out between us? If we try this and it falls apart? Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Then we deal with it like adults. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression softened, the walls she'd built around herself cracking just a little more. I haven't done this in a long time, she admitted quietly. The dating thing. The letting someone in thing. I don't know if I remember how. Neither do I, so we'll figure it out together. She smiled and it transformed her entire face. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we've been making it complicated because we're scared. I am scared, Victoria whispered. Terrified, actually. Me too. They sat there, hands linked across the table, two terrified people choosing courage over comfort. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with life, strangers typing and talking and living their own complicated stories. But in that moment, Ethan and Victoria were their own world, separate and fragile and full of possibility. Tell me something else that's true, Victoria said, echoing their conversation from Friday. Ethan thought about it. I think my daughter would like you. Victoria's eyes widened. Really? She's been asking questions lately about why I'm always alone, why I don't have friends over. I think she's worried about me. She sounds perceptive. She is. Too perceptive sometimes. Ethan hesitated. I know it's early and this is all brand new, but eventually, if this goes somewhere, I'd want you to meet her. Victoria's throat worked as she swallowed hard. I've never been around kids much. I wouldn't know what to say. You don't have to say anything profound. Lily mostly talks about dinosaurs and space. Just listen, and she'll love you. I'd like that, Victoria said softly. When you're ready. No rush. They finished their drinks slowly, talking about small things now. Favorite books, worst vacations, the mundane details that built the scaffolding of knowing someone. When they finally stood to leave, the sun had set and the streetlights cast everything in warm orange glow. Outside the coffee shop, they paused on the sidewalk. This feels like a second first date, Victoria said. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure yet. Ethan smiled. Fair enough. Victoria stepped closer, and for a heartbeat he thought she might kiss him. Instead, she reached up and touched his cheek gently, her fingers warm against his skin. Thank you for staying, she whispered. Again. Thank you for seeing me. She dropped her hand and stepped back, the professional mask sliding into place even as her eyes stayed soft. I'll see you at work, Mr. Cole. See you at work, Miss Hale. She walked toward her car, and Ethan watched her go, his heart doing something strange and unfamiliar in his chest. Hope, he realized. This was what hope felt like when you'd forgotten it existed. He drove home to find Lily already in her pajamas, courtesy of the neighbor who watched her after school. He paid Mrs. Chen thanked her and locked the door behind him. Daddy! Lily ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. You're late. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I had a meeting after work. Was it important? Ethan crouched down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yeah, Ladybug. It was really important. Something good happened today. What happened? I got a new job. Well, kind of. A better job at the same place. Lily's eyes went wide. Does that mean you'll be home more? The question pierced him. I hope so. I'm going to try. Okay. She hugged him tight. I'm proud of you, Daddy. Ethan held her close, his eyes stinging. I'm proud of you too, Lil. Later, after Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, Ethan sat on his back porch with a beer he didn't really want and stared at the stars. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Today was a good day. Ethan. Yeah, it was. Victoria. Sleep well, Ethan. Ethan. You too, Victoria. He set his phone down and closed his eyes, breathing in the cool night air. Somewhere in the city, Victoria was doing the same thing, sitting in her penthouse, staring at her phone, wondering if they were both crazy for trying this. But crazy or not, they were trying. And that, Ethan thought, was more than either of them had done in a very long time. The week that followed was a careful dance of professionalism and stolen moments. At work, Ethan dove into his new role with a focus that surprised even himself. He met with Linda Chen, who turned out to be exactly as brilliant and fair as Victoria had promised. He assembled his team, reviewed project timelines, and started implementing changes that had been stuck in Derek's bureaucratic quicksand for months. People watched him carefully, waiting for him to fail, waiting for proof that his promotion had been favoritism and nothing more. Ethan felt their eyes on him constantly, felt the weight of their doubt. So he worked harder, stayed later, delivered results that spoke louder than any defense he could offer. And every evening, when the office emptied and the sun set over the city, he'd find a text from Victoria waiting. Victoria, how was your day? Ethan, exhausting. Yours? Victoria, the same. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? Ethan, can't. Lily has a school thing. Friday? Victoria, Friday works. They met on Friday at a different restaurant, quieter and more out of the way. They talked for hours, peeling back layers, learning each other in increments. Victoria told him about her father, a brilliant, demanding man who'd built Hale Industries from nothing and expected his daughter to carry that legacy without stumbling. Ethan told her about Sarah's final months, the hospital rooms and hard conversations, the moment he'd realized she was really gone. Do you still love her? Victoria asked quietly. Always, Ethan said without hesitation. But I'm learning that love doesn't have to be a cage. She wanted me to keep living. I think this is what that looks like. Victoria nodded, her eyes bright. My father wanted me to be strong, unbreakable. I think he'd be horrified to know how lonely that made me. Or maybe he'd be glad you're finally letting someone in. Maybe. They left the restaurant holding hands, and this time when they reached Victoria's car, she didn't pull away. She turned to him, her back against the driver's door, her eyes searching his face. I'm terrible at this, she said. At what? At not being in control, at not knowing what happens next. Ethan stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Then let's figure it out together. And finally, he kissed her. It was soft and tentative, the kiss of two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. Victoria's hands came up to his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt, and Ethan pulled her closer, the world narrowing to just this moment, just this woman, just this impossible second chance they were both brave enough to take. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling, really smiling, and Ethan felt something inside him shift and settle. Okay, she whispered. We're doing this. Yeah, Ethan said, his forehead resting against hers. We really are. 3 weeks later, Ethan stood in his kitchen on a Saturday morning, staring at the text message that had just arrived. Victoria, I know this is sudden, but are you free today? I'd really like to meet Lily. His heart did something complicated in his chest, equal parts excitement and terror. They'd been seeing each other regularly, stealing dinners and coffee dates between his parenting schedule and her endless work obligations. But this was different. This was Victoria stepping into the most important part of his life, the part he'd protected fiercely since Sarah died. He glanced toward the living room where Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by crayons and construction paper, humming to herself as she drew what appeared to be a T-Rex riding a rocket ship. Ethan, she'd love to meet you, but I need to talk to her first. Victoria, of course. Take your time. No pressure. Ethan, how about lunch? There's a diner near the park. Casual. Victoria, perfect. Text me when you're ready. Ethan set his phone down and walked into the living room. Lily looked up, her face lighting up the way it always did when he entered a room, and the familiar ache of love and responsibility tightened around his ribs. Hey, Ladybug, he said, settling onto the floor beside her. Can we talk for a minute? Lily set down her purple crayon. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. Nothing like that. Ethan picked up one of her drawings, a surprisingly detailed rendering of the solar system. I wanted to ask you something. How would you feel about meeting someone today? Like a new friend? Sort of. Remember how I told you I got a new job? Uh-huh. Well, there's someone who helped make that happen. Her name is Victoria. She's important to me. And I thought maybe you two could meet. Lily tilted her head, studying him with those two perceptive eyes that reminded him painfully of Sarah. Is she your girlfriend? The question shouldn't have surprised him, but it did. I think so, maybe. We're still figuring that out. Does she know about Mommy? Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, Lil, she knows, and she knows how much Mommy meant to both of us. Lily was quiet for a moment, her small fingers tracing the edge of her drawing. Is she nice? Very nice. I think you'd like her. Does she like dinosaurs? Ethan smiled despite the emotion pressing against his chest. I don't know. You'll have to ask her. Lily considered this seriously, then nodded. Okay, I'll meet her. You sure? Yeah. But Daddy? She looked up at him, her expression suddenly very grown up. If she makes you sad, I'll tell her to leave. Ethan pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. I love you, you know that? I know, I love you too. An hour later, they walked into Bernie's diner, a place Ethan and Lily had been coming to since she was old enough to sit in a high chair. The booths were cracked vinyl, the coffee was terrible, and the pancakes were the best in the city. Victoria was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking profoundly out of place in her designer jeans and cashmere sweater among the truckers and families. When she saw them, she stood up, and Ethan watched nervousness flash across her face before she smoothed it away. Hi, Victoria said softly. Hi, Ethan replied. Victoria, this is Lily. Lily, this is Victoria. Lily stepped forward, extending her hand with the formal politeness Ethan had taught her. It's nice to meet you. Victoria shook her hand, looking genuinely touched. It's nice to meet you too, Lily. Your dad's told me a lot about you. He's told me about you too. He says you're important. Victoria's eyes flicked to Ethan, something warm and vulnerable in her gaze. He's important to me too. They slid into the booth, Lily next to Ethan, Victoria across from them. The waitress came by and they ordered pancakes for Lily, a burger for Ethan, a salad for Victoria that she probably wouldn't finish. Lily stared at Victoria with open curiosity. Do you like dinosaurs? Victoria blinked. I don't know much about them, honestly. Do you? I know everything about dinosaurs. Dad says I'm an expert. That's very impressive. What's your favorite? Ankylosaurus. It has armor and a club tail. People always pick T-Rex because it's famous, but Ankylosaurus could actually defend itself. Victoria smiled. That's a good point. I never thought about it that way. Lily launched into an enthusiastic explanation of Cretaceous period herbivores, and Ethan watched Victoria listen with genuine interest, asking questions, nodding at the right moments. She wasn't patronizing. She wasn't forcing it. She was just present. The food arrived and the conversation shifted. Lily asked Victoria what she did for work, and Victoria tried to explain running a company in 7-year-old terms. So, you're like the principal of a really big school? Lily asked. Sort of, yeah. Except instead of teachers and students, I have engineers and managers. Dad's an engineer. I know. He's a very good one. Lily beamed. He's the best. He helps me with my science homework even when he's really tired. Ethan felt his cheeks warm. Lil, it's true, Lily insisted. She turned back to Victoria. Do you have kids? Victoria's expression faltered for just a second. No, I don't. Do you want them? Lily, Ethan said gently, that's a pretty personal question. It's okay, Victoria said quietly. She looked at Lily with surprising honesty. I never really thought about it much. I've been focused on work for a long time, but lately I've been thinking maybe I missed out on something important. Lily nodded sagely, like she understood completely. You can share my dad if you want. He's pretty great. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. Ethan saw Victoria's eyes glisten with sudden tears, saw her hand tremble slightly as she reached for her water glass. That's very generous of you, Victoria managed, her voice thick. Lily went back to her pancakes, oblivious to the weight of what she'd just offered. But Ethan and Victoria locked eyes across the table, And in that look was everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. This wasn't casual. This wasn't temporary. This was real, complicated, and terrifying in the best possible way. After lunch, they walked to the park. Lily ran ahead to the playground, and Ethan and Victoria followed at a slower pace, hands linked. "She's amazing," Victoria said softly. "You've done such a good job with her. I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly." "You're not screwing her up at all. She's confident, kind, curious. That doesn't happen by accident." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Thank you for today. I know this isn't easy." "Are you kidding? This is the best day I've had in years." Victoria stopped walking, turning to face him. "I meant what I said in there. I have been missing something. I just didn't realize what until now." "Victoria, I'm falling for you, Ethan. For both of you. And that scares me more than anything I've ever done." Ethan pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm falling for you too. And yeah, it's terrifying. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone." They stood like that, wrapped in each other while Lily's laughter echoed from the playground. And for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Not the grief disappearing, that would never fully leave, but the guilt loosening, just enough to let something new grow beside it. Victoria started appearing in their lives more regularly after that. She came to Lily's soccer game the following Saturday, cheering from the sidelines with genuine enthusiasm, even though Lily's team lost spectacularly. She joined them for pizza night on Wednesday, laughing as Lily showed her how to fold a slice properly. She sent Ethan articles about space exploration that she thought Lily might like, and texted him photos of buildings she passed that she thought had interesting architecture. At work, they maintained careful professional distance. Ethan reported to Linda Chen, and Victoria treated him exactly like she treated every other senior lead. But sometimes, late in the evening when most people had gone home, she'd stop by his office with coffee, and they'd talk about their days, the door open, everything appropriate, and yet somehow intimate in its quiet normalcy. The whispers started anyway. Ethan heard them in break rooms, saw the looks from colleagues who'd worked at Hale Industries longer than he had. Some were curious, some were envious, and some were outright hostile. He ignored most of it, letting his work speak for itself. His aerospace project was ahead of schedule and under budget. His team respected him. The results were undeniable, but not everyone was willing to accept that. 4 weeks after his promotion, Ethan was called into Linda Chen's office. She was in her late 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that missed nothing. She gestured for him to sit, her expression unreadable. "Close the door," she said. Ethan's stomach tightened, but he did as she asked. Linda folded her hands on her desk. "I'm going to be direct with you, Ethan. There are rumors circulating about you and Victoria." "I'm aware." "Are they true?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "We're seeing each other, yes. It started before my promotion, if that's what you're asking." Linda studied him for a long moment. "I need to know something. Did Victoria promote you because of your relationship?" "No, she promoted me because Derek Voss was burying my work and taking credit for it. She promoted me because my project outcomes justified it." Ethan leaned forward. "I know how this looks, Linda. I know people are talking, but I earned this position, and I'll keep earning it every single day." Linda's expression softened slightly. "I believe you. I've reviewed your work myself, and it's exceptional. But perception matters, Ethan. Fair or not, people are going to question every decision you make, every project you lead. They're going to assume favoritism. Then I'll prove them wrong. You shouldn't have to, but you will, because that's the reality of this situation." She sighed. "I'm not telling you to end your relationship. That's not my place. But I am telling you to be smart about it. Keep your personal and professional lives separate. Don't give anyone ammunition." "Understood. And Ethan, Victoria's position makes her a target. If this relationship becomes public knowledge beyond rumors, people will come after both of you. Are you prepared for that?" Ethan thought about Lily's laughter in the park, about Victoria's smile when she thought no one was watching, about the way it felt to finally let himself hope again. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I am." Linda nodded. "Then good luck. You're going to need it." Ethan told Victoria about the conversation that night, sitting in her penthouse with the city lights spread out below them. Lily was at a sleepover, and for once they had time that wasn't measured in stolen hours. Victoria listened without interrupting, her jaw tight. When he finished, she stood and walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. "I'm putting your career at risk," she said flatly. "No, you're not. I'm making my own choices." "People are already talking, Ethan. What happens when it gets worse? What happens when the board starts asking questions? Then we deal with it." Ethan stood and crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "I'm not walking away because people are gossiping. I've spent 3 years caring too much about what everyone else thinks. I'm done with that." Victoria turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "You have Lily to think about. If this blows up, if your reputation gets damaged, then I'll rebuild it. But I'm not losing you because I'm scared of what might happen." "You should be scared." "I'm scared." "Good. That means this matters." Ethan cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Victoria. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore." Victoria's breath caught. "Ethan, you don't have to say it back, not until you're ready, but I need you to know that I'm in this, completely. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks, and she pulled him into a fierce kiss, her hands fisted in his shirt. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been in love with you since you sat down across from me in that restaurant and refused to leave." Ethan laughed, the sound breaking on something that might have been a sob. "We're doing this then? Really doing this?" "Yeah, we really are." They stood wrapped together as the city glittered below, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate loneliness and chosen to build something new. It wouldn't be easy. The whispers would get louder, the scrutiny sharper. But for the first time in years, both of them felt like they were finally, truly living instead of just surviving. The storm came 2 weeks later. Ethan was in a project meeting when his phone buzzed with an urgent text from Victoria. "Victoria, we have a problem. Board meeting in 20 minutes. Someone leaked information about us to the board chair." His blood went cold. He excused himself from the meeting and headed straight for the executive floor, his mind racing. This was exactly what Linda had warned him about. Someone had weaponized their relationship, and now it was about to explode in their faces. Victoria's assistant waved him through to her office. Victoria stood by the window, her posture rigid, every inch the CEO preparing for battle. "What happened?" Ethan asked. "Gregory Morrison, our board chair, received an anonymous email this morning. Photos of us at dinner, at the park with Lily. Timestamps, dates, a detailed timeline." Her voice was ice cold, but he could see the fear beneath it. "Someone's been following us. What does Morrison want? To question my judgment, to suggest that I've let personal feelings compromise my professional decisions. He's calling an emergency board session." She turned to him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely shaken. "They're going to ask if I promoted you because we're involved. Then you tell them the truth, that you promoted me because I earned it. They won't believe that. Not now. Not with photos proving we were seeing each other right around the time of the restructuring." Ethan's mind worked quickly. "When did we have our first dinner?" "Friday, April 12th. "And when did you start the departmental review?" "Early March. I have emails, meeting notes, preliminary reports." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "The review started weeks before we met." "Exactly. You were already investigating Derek and planning the restructuring before you even knew my name. The timeline proves it." Victoria grabbed her laptop and started pulling up files. "I documented everything, every performance review I analyzed, every project file I cross-referenced. It's all time-stamped." "Then that's your answer. You weren't playing favorites. You were doing your job." Victoria looked at him, and some of the fear in her expression eased. "You're right. The data supports the decision. And Victoria, even if it didn't, even if you had promoted me just because you loved me, I would have proven myself worthy anyway. I've delivered every single thing you asked for and more." She crossed to him and kissed him hard. "I know you have, but thank you for saying it." The board meeting was brutal. Ethan wasn't allowed in the room, but he waited outside, pacing the hallway while his future hung in the balance. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the door opened and Victoria emerged, her face carefully neutral. Gregory Morrison followed her out, a silver-haired man in his 60s with the kind of face that had probably never smiled genuinely in its life. He looked at Ethan with cold assessment. "Mr. Cole," he said, "I've reviewed the timeline of Miss Hale's departmental investigation. The documentation supports her claim that your promotion was based on merit, not favoritism." Ethan kept his expression neutral. "I appreciate you taking the time to verify that. However," Morrison continued, "perception remains a concern. The board has decided that Ms. Hale's relationship with an employee creates an unacceptable conflict of interest." Ethan's heart stopped. "What does that mean?" "It means one of you needs to resign." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Victoria's face went white. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice tight. "I'm completely serious. Either Mr. Cole resigns from his position or you step down as CEO. Those are your options." Morrison's expression was carved from stone. "You have until Monday to decide." He walked away, leaving them standing in the hallway, the world crumbling around them. Victoria turned to Ethan, her eyes wide with panic. "I won't let you resign. I won't let them do this to you. And I won't let you lose everything you've built." Ethan grabbed her hands. "We'll figure this out." "How?" "There's no good choice here, Ethan. Either you give up the career breakthrough you've earned, or I abandon my father's legacy." "Then we find a third option." "There is no third option." Ethan pulled her into an empty conference room and closed the door. His mind was racing, turning over possibilities, looking for the angle they'd missed. "What if I did resign?" he said slowly. "But not from engineering, from Hale Industries entirely." Victoria stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "I could take a position somewhere else. A competitor, maybe. Or start my own consulting firm. I've got the credentials now, the track record. And then there's no conflict of interest because I don't work for you anymore." "You'd leave? Just like that?" "For you?" "Yeah, I would." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, no. You've worked too hard. I've worked hard for a job. But I'm in love with you. That's not the same thing." He cupped her face gently. "I can find another job, Victoria. I can't find another you." She kissed him desperately, and when they broke apart, she was crying in earnest. "I can't ask you to do that," she whispered. "You're not asking. I'm offering." They stood there, holding each other while the weight of the decision pressed down on them. Outside the window, the city continued its indifferent rhythm, thousands of people living their lives with no idea that in this small conference room, two people were choosing love over everything they'd worked for. "There has to be another way," Victoria said finally. "Give me the weekend. Let me think." "Okay. But Victoria, whatever happens, we're going to be okay. I promise you that." She nodded, but the fear in her eyes said she wasn't sure either of them could keep that promise. Ethan went home that night and held Lily a little tighter, kissed her forehead a little longer. She asked him if something was wrong, and he told her everything was fine, hating himself for the lie. After she was asleep, he sat at his kitchen table with a beer and his laptop, looking at job postings he'd never imagined applying to. His phone rang. "Victoria." "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi." Her voice sounded small, fragile. "I've been thinking." "Yeah?" "What if I'm the one who steps down?" Ethan sat up straight. "Absolutely not. Hear me out. I could resign as CEO, but stay on the board. Transition to a chairman role. It would preserve the company's stability, and you could keep your position." "Victoria, that company is your life. You and Lily are my life now. The company is just what I do." The words broke something open in Ethan's chest. "I can't let you do that." "Why not? You were willing to resign for me. That's different." "How?" "Because Hale Industries is your father's legacy. It's everything he built. If you walk away from that, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And if you walk away from the career you've earned, you won't?" They were both silent, trapped in the impossible choice Morrison had forced on them. "I hate this," Victoria whispered. "I hate that we have to choose." "I know, me too. What do we do, Ethan?" He closed his eyes, thinking about Friday nights in restaurants, about Lily's laughter in the park, about the way Victoria had looked at him when she said she loved him. "We do what we should have done from the beginning," he said finally. "We fight." "What?" "We fight. We don't accept their ultimatum. We don't resign. We force them to actually fire one of us. And when they do, we make them explain exactly why loving someone is grounds for termination. The board won't back down. Maybe not. But Morrison isn't the whole board. There are other members who respect you, who know what you've accomplished. We go to them. We make the case that this is discrimination, that they're punishing us for a personal relationship that has no bearing on job performance. That's a huge risk. Everything worth doing is. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then he heard her exhale, and when she spoke again, there was steel in her voice. "Okay," she said, "let's fight." They spent the weekend building their case like lawyers preparing for trial. Victoria compiled every document related to the departmental review, emails dated weeks before their first meeting, performance analyses, budget reports that showed Derek's inflated claims versus actual project outcomes. Ethan gathered his own evidence, project files with timestamps, peer evaluations, the measurable results he'd delivered since his promotion. On Sunday evening, Victoria sat at Ethan's kitchen table while Lily did homework in the living room, both of them surrounded by printouts and laptops. The domesticity of it struck Ethan hard. This brilliant, powerful woman in jeans and a sweater, reading glasses perched on her nose, completely at home in his modest house. "We have a strong case," Victoria said, tapping her pen against a spreadsheet. "The timeline is irrefutable. I started the investigation March 8th. We didn't meet until April 12th. That's 5 weeks of documented work before I even knew your name. And my performance since the promotion speaks for itself," Ethan added. "The aerospace project is delivering results that would justify the promotion regardless of our relationship. Morrison knows that. That's why he's not actually questioning your competence. He's questioning my judgment for putting myself in this position in the first place." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we show the board that your judgment has been flawless, that every decision you've made has been in the company's best interest, including promoting me." Victoria squeezed his fingers. "I need to talk to the other board members individually. Build support before Morrison can poison the well." "Who's on your side?" "Margaret Oakes, definitely. She's been fighting Morrison's old guard mentality for years. David Winters might be persuaded. He respects data over politics. And Jennifer Park owes me. I saved her division from budget cuts last year. That's 3 votes plus yours. How many do you need?" 7 out of 12 for a majority. Morrison controls at least 4, maybe 5. Victoria rubbed her temples. "It's going to be close." From the living room, Lily's voice called out, "Dad, I need help with this math problem." Ethan glanced at Victoria, who nodded. "Go. I'll keep working on this." He found Lily frowning at her homework, pencil tapping against her notebook. "What's got you stuck, Ladybug?" "Word problems. They don't make sense." Ethan sat beside her and read the problem. "Okay, so if Sarah has 15 apples and gives away a third of them, how many does she have left?" Lily worked through it slowly, and Ethan guided her with gentle questions rather than answers. When she finally got it right, she beamed at him. "Thanks, Dad." She glanced toward the kitchen, where Victoria was still visible through the doorway. "Is Victoria okay? She looks worried." Ethan chose his words carefully. "She's dealing with some work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it because of you?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" Lily shrugged. "At school, Tommy's mom started dating his teacher, and everyone made a big deal about it. Is it like that?" Ethan's heart ached at how perceptive she was. "Sort of, yeah. Some people think it's complicated that Victoria and I are together because we work at the same company." "But you said you earned your new job." "I did." "Then those people are being dumb." Ethan couldn't help but smile. "It's a little more complicated than that, Lil. Grown-up stuff is always complicated." She closed her notebook decisively. "But I like Victoria. She makes you happy. And she listened to my whole presentation about the Jurassic period without getting bored once. That's important." "It really is," Ethan agreed softly. "So tell those people they're wrong. You're good at explaining things." If only it were that simple. But Lily's faith in him settled something in Ethan's chest. She believed in him. Victoria believed in him. Maybe that was enough. Monday morning arrived with the weight of a reckoning. Victoria went to the office early, scheduling back-to-back meetings with board members before Morrison could control the narrative. Ethan went to work and tried to focus on his projects, but his mind was elsewhere, checking his phone every few minutes for updates. At 10:30, a text arrived. Victoria. Margaret is with us. So is David. Jennifer is still on the fence. Ethan. That's progress. Victoria. Morrison called an emergency board vote for Wednesday afternoon. He's forcing this to a head. Ethan. Then we have 2 days to flip the votes we need. Victoria. I'm scared, Ethan. Ethan. Me too. But we're going to win this. He hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. That evening, Victoria came to his house looking exhausted. Lily was at Emma's for the night, giving them space to strategize without little ears listening. Ethan made dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, and they ate mostly in silence. Jennifer's husband works for Morrison's investment firm, Victoria said finally, setting down her fork. That's why she won't commit. She's afraid of retaliation. Can we offer her something? Protection? A guarantee? I already tried. She's too scared. Victoria pushed her plate away, barely touched. We need 4 votes, Ethan. We have 3 confirmed, maybe. That's not enough. Then we find the 4th. Who else is left? Robert Chen, Patricia Mills, and Thomas Vance. Robert's conservative but fair. Patricia follows whoever she thinks will win. Thomas is Morrison's golf buddy. So Robert's our best shot. Robert's also risk-averse. He won't support us unless he's absolutely certain it's the right move. Ethan thought for a moment. What if we reframe this? It's not about us defending our relationship. It's about the board setting a dangerous precedent. If they can force out a CEO for having a personal life, what message does that send? Who's safe? Victoria's eyes sharpened. That's good. Robert has a daughter in her 30s. She's probably dating, building her career. He'd hate the idea of her being punished for falling in love. Then that's the argument we make. This isn't about Victoria and Ethan. It's about whether the board believes personal relationships disqualify someone from professional excellence. Victoria stood abruptly and crossed to him, pulling him into a fierce kiss. You're brilliant, you know that? I have my moments. She rested her forehead against his. Whatever happens Wednesday, I want you to know something. Meeting you changed my life. Even if we lose, even if Morrison forces one of us out, I won't regret a single moment of this. We're not losing, Ethan said firmly. We've come too far to give up now. Tuesday was a blur of preparation. Victoria met with Robert Chen over lunch, making the case that went beyond personal interest. She framed it as a question of corporate culture, of whether Hale Industries would be a place that valued results or policed personal lives. Robert listened carefully, but made no commitments. Ethan, meanwhile, met with Linda Chen again. She'd heard about the board meeting and came to his office with a grave expression. I want you to know that I support you, Linda said without preamble. Your work has been exceptional. If the board forces you out, it's their loss. Thank you. That means a lot. But Ethan, I need to be honest with you. Even if you survive this, your reputation is going to take a hit. People will always question whether you earned your position or whether you slept your way into it. It's not fair, but it's reality. I know. Can you live with that? Ethan thought about Victoria's smile, about Lily asking when Victoria could come for dinner again, about the way it felt to wake up excited for the day ahead instead of just dreading it less. Yeah, he said. I can live with that. Linda nodded slowly. Then I hope you win. And if you do, I'll make damn sure everyone knows exactly how good you are at your job. That evening, Ethan picked up Lily from Emma's house. His sister pulled him aside in the hallway while Lily gathered her things. How bad is it? Emma asked quietly. Bad, but we're fighting. I feel responsible for this whole mess. If I hadn't set you up with her... Don't. Ethan gripped her shoulder. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. Whatever happens, that was worth it. Emma's eyes glistened. She really loves you, doesn't she? Yeah, she really does. Then fight like hell, little brother. Some things are worth burning the world down for. Wednesday arrived cold and gray, the sky threatening rain. Ethan took Lily to school, kissed her goodbye, and drove to Hale Industries with his stomach in knots. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. He wasn't allowed to attend, but Victoria had promised to text him the moment it was over. The morning crawled by in agonizing slowness. Ethan tried to work, tried to focus on calculations and timelines, but his mind kept drifting to the executive floor where his future was being decided by people who'd never spoken to him. At 1:45, his phone buzzed. Victoria. Walking into the meeting now. I love you. Ethan. I love you too. Go be brilliant. Then nothing. Just silence and the ticking of the clock on his wall. 2 o'clock came and went. Then 2:30, 3, 3:30. Ethan's phone stayed silent. At 4:15, his office door opened. Victoria stood there, and her face told him everything before she said a word. We won, she whispered. Ethan was out of his chair and across the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. Say that again. We won. 7 votes to 5. Morrison tried everything, but Robert Chen voted with us. So did Patricia Mills once she saw which way the wind was blowing. What about Jennifer? Morrison got to her. She voted against us. Victoria pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But it didn't matter. We had the votes. Ethan kissed her, hard and desperate, relief flooding through him like a physical force. When they broke apart, Victoria was crying and laughing at the same time. Robert said something during the meeting, she said, wiping at her eyes. He said his daughter worked her whole life to become a surgeon, and if someone tried to take that away from her because she fell in love with a colleague, he'd burn the hospital down. He said, love shouldn't be a crime, and excellence speaks for itself. Robert Chen is my new favorite person. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and free. Morrison's furious. He threatened to resign from the board. Did he? No, he's too stubborn, but his influence is broken. Margaret called for a vote of no confidence in his chairmanship. That's happening next month. Ethan held her tighter, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. They'd won. Against the odds, against the politics, against everyone who said it was impossible, they'd won. What happens now? He asked. Now we go back to work. I run my company. You lead your projects, and we prove to everyone that we were right to fight for this. And after work? Victoria smiled. After work, we go home. Together. The word home settled over them like a benediction. Not his house or her penthouse, but home. The space they were building between them, fragile and new and entirely theirs. I need to tell Lily, Ethan said. She's been worried. Let's tell her together. They left the office hand in hand, not hiding anymore, not pretending. People stared as they walked through the lobby, whispers following in their wake. Let them stare, Ethan thought. Let them whisper. He'd spent too long caring about other people's opinions. They picked Lily up from after-school care together. She ran to them, her backpack bouncing, and immediately sensed the shift in energy. Did something good happen? She asked, looking between them. Something very good, Victoria said, kneeling down to Lily's level. Remember those people who thought it was complicated that your dad and I were together? The dumb ones? Victoria's lips twitched. Yes. Well, we talked to them, and they agreed that we get to make our own choices. Lily's face lit up. So you can keep being Dad's girlfriend? That's okay with you. Lily threw her arms around Victoria's neck, and Ethan watched his daughter embrace this woman who'd walked into their lives and refused to leave. Victoria hugged her back, her eyes closing, and Ethan saw something shift in her expression, a softness, a belonging, a piece of herself clicking into place. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Lily asked when she pulled back. Ethan laughed. Yeah, Ladybug, we can get ice cream. They went to the same diner where they'd had their first lunch together, sliding into the same booth. Lily ordered a sundae with extra cherries, and they talked about her day, her upcoming science fair project, the new book she was reading. Normal things. Beautiful, ordinary things. Watching Victoria listen to Lily explain the differences between igneous and sedimentary rocks, Ethan felt something settle deep in his chest. This was what happiness looked like. Not the absence of pain or grief or difficulty, but the presence of love and connection, and people who saw you and stayed anyway. Later that night, after Lily was asleep and Victoria had gone back to her penthouse to handle some late-night emails, Ethan sat on his back porch under the stars. His phone buzzed. Victoria, thank you for fighting for us. Ethan, thank you for being worth fighting for. Victoria, I have a question. Ethan, okay. Victoria, my lease is up in 2 months. I could renew. or I could not. Ethan's heart started pounding. He typed carefully. Ethan, what are you saying? Victoria, I'm saying your house has that extra bedroom, and Lily asked me last week if I knew how to braid hair. And I've been sleeping better lately when I'm with you than I have in years. Ethan, Victoria Hale, are you asking to move in with me? Victoria, maybe. Is that crazy? Ethan, completely. We've only been together for 2 months. Victoria, you're right. Too fast. Forget I said anything. Ethan, I didn't say no. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Victoria, you didn't say yes either. Ethan, I'm thinking about Lily. What it means for her. Whether she's ready for that kind of change. Victoria, of course, take your time. There's no rush. Ethan stared at his phone, then made a decision. He walked back inside and gently woke Lily. Dad? She blinked at him sleepily. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Lil, but I need to ask you something important. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Okay. How would you feel if Victoria lived with us? Like, all the time. Not just visiting for dinner or staying over sometimes, but actually living here. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Would she have the guest room? Probably, yeah. Would she help with breakfast? You always burn the pancakes. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. I'm sure she would. Would she still listen to my dinosaur facts? Definitely. Lily nodded slowly, then looked at him with those 2 wise eyes. Dad, do you love her? Very much. Does she love you? She says she does. Does she love me? Ethan's throat tightened. I think she's getting there, Lil. She cares about you a lot. Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. Mommy would want you to be happy, right? The question hit him like a physical blow. Yeah, sweetheart, she would. Then Victoria should live with us. Because you smile more when she's around, and I like hearing you laugh again. Lily yawned. Plus, she promised to teach me about constellations, and you can only name like 3. Ethan pulled her into a hug, his heart so full it ached. You're pretty amazing, you know that? I know. Can I go back to sleep now? Yeah, Ladybug. Go back to sleep. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and went back to his porch. His hands were shaking slightly as he picked up his phone. Ethan. I asked Lily. Victoria. And? Ethan. She said yes. On the condition that you help with breakfast because apparently I burn pancakes. Victoria. I can do that. Ethan. So yes, move in with us. Not because it makes sense or because it's the logical next step. Because I want you here. Because Lily wants you here. Because this house has felt more like a home in the last 2 months than it has in 3 years. Victoria. I'm crying right now, just so you know. Ethan. Good tears or bad tears? Victoria. The best tears. The kind where you're so happy you can't quite believe it's real. Ethan. It's real, I promise. Victoria. Then yes, I'll move in, and I'll learn to make pancakes, and I'll memorize every constellation so I can teach Lily, and I'll love both of you for as long as you'll let me. Ethan set his phone down and looked up at the stars, feeling the ghost of Sarah's presence like a gentle hand on his shoulder. He'd promised her he'd keep living. He'd promised he'd let himself be happy again. And somehow, impossibly, he'd found a way to keep that promise. The next 2 months passed in a blur of cardboard boxes and furniture rearranging and Lily's endless questions about which of Victoria's things were going where. Victoria's penthouse sold quickly, too big, too empty, too full of loneliness she didn't need anymore. She kept her father's desk and a few photographs, but most of the expensive furniture went to auction. I don't need all that, she told Ethan as they packed up her study. I just need you and Lily and a place that feels like it's mine. Moving day arrived on a Saturday in late July. Emma showed up with coffee and donuts, declaring herself the official supervisor. Lily appointed herself the director of box labeling, writing things like Victoria's important CEO papers and stuff for the kitchen probably in careful block letters. By evening, Victoria's things were integrated into the house that had been just Ethan's. Her books on the shelves beside his, her coffee mug in the cabinet, her toothbrush in the bathroom. Small changes that added up to something monumental. That night, after everything was unpacked and Lily was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the back porch with glasses of wine and looked at the stars. "Are you sure about this?" Victoria asked quietly. "It's not too late to change your mind." "I've never been more sure of anything. Even though people at work are still talking. Even though Morrison glares at me in every board meeting. Even though your life was simpler before I crashed into it." Ethan set down his wine and turned to face her. "My life wasn't simpler, it was smaller. There's a difference." He took her hands. "You didn't crash into my life, Victoria. You walked into it when I needed you most, and you stayed when it got hard. That's not crashing, that's choosing." Victoria leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this. A family, a home, someone who sees past the job title to who I actually am. You deserve all of it. So do you." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the summer night sounds, crickets and distant traffic, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Inside, Lily slept safely in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings taped to her walls. And in the guest room that was now Victoria's office, boxes waited to be unpacked, each one containing pieces of the life she'd left behind to build something new. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, more whispers at work, more board meetings where Morrison tried to undermine her, more moments of doubt when the weight of blending their lives felt overwhelming. But they'd face it together. That was the promise they'd made, standing in that coffee shop weeks ago when this was all still new and terrifying. "Ethan?" Victoria said softly. "Yeah? I'm home." He kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, you are." And somewhere in the stars above them, in the space between what was lost and what was found, two broken people who'd chosen to rebuild together finally, truly began to heal. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book neither of them wanted to put down. The house that had felt too quiet for 3 years now hummed with life. Victoria's laptop open on the kitchen table during early morning calls, Lily's science project spreading across the dining room, the three of them navigating the beautiful chaos of becoming a family. It wasn't always smooth. There were arguments about boundaries and parenting styles, nights when Victoria worked too late and Ethan felt the old resentment creeping in. Mornings when Lily tested how far she could push this new authority figure who wasn't her mother but was trying so hard to be something meaningful. But they worked through it, all of them learning the rhythms of each other's needs, building something that felt increasingly solid beneath their feet. At Hale Industries, Ethan's aerospace project became the flagship success story of the year. His team delivered the final phase 3 weeks ahead of schedule and 12% under budget, with quality metrics that exceeded every benchmark. The whispers about favoritism quieted as the results spoke louder than gossip ever could. Even Morrison couldn't argue with numbers that good. Victoria, meanwhile, had transformed the company culture in ways that went far beyond one departmental restructuring. She implemented transparent promotion criteria, mandatory bias training for managers, and a policy protecting employees from retaliation over personal relationships. The changes made headlines in industry publications, and 2 competitors reached out wanting to replicate her model. But success at work, as satisfying as it was, paled in comparison to the quiet moments at home. Lily's 8th birthday party in the backyard. Victoria helping her blow out candles on a cake she'd learned to bake from scratch. Sunday mornings with pancakes that didn't burn, all 3 of them still in pajamas, arguing good-naturedly about whether dinosaurs could have survived if the asteroid had missed. The night Lily fell asleep between them during a movie, and Victoria had looked at Ethan with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Is this what happy feels like?" It was happy, messy and complicated and sometimes uncertain, but undeniably, beautifully happy. Then came the evening in mid-February when everything shifted again. Ethan came home from work to find Victoria in the kitchen, staring at her phone with an expression he couldn't quite read. Lily was at a friend's house for a sleepover, leaving the house unusually quiet. "Hey," he said, setting down his briefcase. "Everything okay?" Victoria looked up and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. His heart lurched. "Victoria, what's wrong?" She handed him her phone. On the screen was an email from Margaret Oakes, the board member who'd supported them during the vote. The subject line read, "Chairmanship nomination." Ethan scanned the message quickly. The board had voted to remove Morrison as chair, and they were nominating Victoria to replace him. "This is amazing," Ethan said, looking up at her. "Why are you crying?" Because I don't know if I want it, Victoria said, her voice breaking. Board chair means more responsibility, more travel, more time away from here, from you and Lily. I've spent my whole life chasing the next promotion, the next achievement, and for what? So I can be even lonelier at the top? Ethan set the phone down and pulled her into his arms. Hey, listen to me. You're not that person anymore. You're not alone. But what if taking this position means I become her again? What if I turn back into the woman who sat in a restaurant crying because she had everything except the things that actually matter? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because you're not making this decision alone anymore. Because you have people who love you and will call you out if you start disappearing into work again. He cupped her face gently. But Victoria, this is still your choice. If you want the chairmanship, take it. We'll figure out the balance together. And if you don't want it, that's okay too. You don't have to keep climbing just because there are more rungs on the ladder. Victoria leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. I need to think about it. Then think. Take all the time you need. She spent the next week in quiet contemplation, weighing what the chairmanship would mean. Ethan watched her struggle with it, watched her make lists of pros and cons, watched her stare out windows with that distant look that meant she was running scenarios in her head. On Friday evening, she asked if they could go back to Marcello's, the restaurant where they'd had their first date. Ethan arranged for Emma to watch Lily, and they drove across the city in comfortable silence. The restaurant looked exactly the same. Warm lighting, white tablecloths, the same elegant atmosphere that had witnessed Victoria's tears and Ethan's decision to stay. They were seated at a different table this time, but the memories hung in the air between them. I've made a decision, Victoria said after they'd ordered. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Okay. I'm going to accept the chairmanship, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? I'm restructuring my role as CEO, promoting a COO to handle day-to-day operations so I can focus on strategic direction. That means fewer 18-hour days, fewer last-minute crises. More time for the things that actually matter. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want this position, Ethan, but I want it on my terms. I want to prove you can be successful without sacrificing everything else. That you can lead a company and still make it home for dinner. That power doesn't have to mean loneliness. Ethan squeezed her hand. I think that's exactly what your father would have wanted for you. Victoria's eyes glistened. You think so? I know so. He wanted you to be strong. You're showing him that strength means knowing what's worth protecting. Their food arrived, but neither of them moved to eat. They sat there, hands linked across the table, just like they had that first night, except now they knew what came next. Now they had a history and a future in the complicated, beautiful middle ground between them. I have something to ask you, Ethan said quietly. Victoria's breath caught. Okay. Not here. After dinner. They ate slowly, conversation flowing easily now, talking about Lily's upcoming science fair, about the new initiatives Victoria wanted to implement as chair, about the vacation they'd been planning for spring break. Normal, domestic, wonderfully mundane things. When they finished, Ethan paid the check and led Victoria outside. The night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Where are we going? Victoria asked. You'll see. He drove to the park where they'd taken Lily that first day they'd all been together. The playground was empty now, swings swaying gently in the breeze, the whole space quiet and peaceful. Ethan parked and turned to Victoria. Remember this place? Of course. This is where Lily told me I could share you. Yeah. He took a deep breath, his heart hammering. That's also the day I knew I was going to marry you. Victoria went very still. Ethan, wait, let me say this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I've been carrying this around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. I thought about doing this at home, or at some fancy restaurant, or in front of Lily so she could be part of it. But then I realized the right moment is just now, here, where it all started to feel real. He opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated, so perfectly Victoria that her hand flew to her mouth. I know we've only been together for 8 months, Ethan continued, his voice shaking slightly. I know people will say it's too fast, that we should wait, that we're being reckless. But I've lived through losing someone I love. I've learned that time is precious and tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and I don't want to waste a single day not being married to you. Victoria was crying now, tears streaming freely down her face. You walked into my life when I'd given up on feeling anything but grief. You saw me when I was invisible. You fought for us when it would have been easier to walk away. You love my daughter like she's yours. You make me want to be better, do better, try harder. He took the ring from the box, his hand steady now despite the emotion flooding through him. Victoria Hale, will you marry me? Victoria nodded, then seemed to realize that wasn't enough and found her voice. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and everything they'd fought through to get to this moment. When they finally broke apart, Victoria held up her hand, watching the diamond catch the streetlight. It's perfect, she whispered. You're perfect. I'm really not. I work too much. I'm terrible at remembering to eat lunch, and I still don't know the difference between half the dinosaurs Lily talks about. Okay, you're perfectly imperfect. How's that? Victoria laughed, the sound bright and free. Better. She looked at him seriously. I want to tell Lily, tonight. Is that okay? She's at Emma's. We could pick her up. Let's go. They drove to Emma's house with Victoria's hand in Ethan's, the ring catching light every time they passed under a street lamp. Emma opened the door, looking confused. Everything okay? I thought you were on a date. We are. Can we come in? Ethan asked. Emma's eyes dropped to Victoria's hand and went wide. Oh my God! Oh my God! She pulled them both into a hug. Finally! I've been waiting for this since the day I set you two up. We need to tell Lily, Victoria said. She's in the living room watching a movie. Go! Go! Emma shooed them inside, beaming. Lily was curled up on the couch with a blanket, engrossed in an animated film about talking animals. She looked up when they entered, her face lighting up. Dad! Victoria! Did you have a good date? The best date, Ethan said, sitting beside her. Victoria settled on her other side. But we came back early because we have something important to tell you. Lily's expression turned serious. What is it? Ethan glanced at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. Ladybug, how would you feel if Victoria and I got married? Lily's eyes went round. Like, actually married? With a wedding and everything? Yeah, with a wedding and everything. Would Victoria be my stepmom? Victoria spoke softly. I would never try to replace your mom, Lily. She'll always be your mom. But I would love to be part of your family officially, if that's okay with you. Lily looked between them, processing. Then, with the kind of directness only an 8-year-old could manage, she asked, Would I be a flower girl? Ethan laughed, relief flooding through him. Absolutely, the best flower girl. And can I help pick the dress? Because I have ideas. Victoria pulled her into a hug. I wouldn't dream of picking a dress without you. Lily hugged her back fiercely, then reached out and pulled Ethan in too. The three of them tangled together on Emma's couch. When they pulled apart, Lily examined Victoria's ring with great interest. It's really pretty, she declared. Dad has good taste. The best taste, Victoria agreed, meeting Ethan's eyes over Lily's head. They stayed at Emma's for another hour, celebrating with impromptu cake and champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for Lily. Emma cried happy tears and declared herself the official wedding planner, a title Victoria gracefully accepted despite probably regretting it later. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, worn out from excitement. Ethan carried her inside and tucked her into bed while Victoria changed into pajamas and started making tea in the kitchen. When Ethan came back downstairs, he found Victoria standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard, the ring on her finger catching the overhead light. Hey, he said softly. You okay? She turned to him with a smile. More than okay. I was just thinking about how different my life looks now compared to a year ago. Last February, I was sitting in my empty penthouse, working until midnight every night, convinced that was just what success looked like. And now you're making tea in a kitchen that smells like Lily's forgotten gym socks and has crayon drawings on the fridge. Exactly, and I've never been happier. Victoria crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Thank you for asking me, for choosing me, for letting me be part of this. Thank you for saying yes, for staying, for loving us enough to fight for this." They stood together in the quiet kitchen, swaying slightly, not quite dancing, but not quite still either. Outside, the world continued spinning. Inside, they'd built something that felt unshakable. The wedding planning took over their lives in the best possible way. Lily threw herself into the role of junior wedding planner with enthusiasm, insisting on being involved in every decision. They chose a small venue, an elegant garden estate that could accommodate the 100 guests they'd carefully winnowed down from Victoria's much longer initial list. "I don't need a massive wedding," Victoria had said during one planning session. "I just need the people who actually matter." Those people turned out to be a surprisingly small circle. A few close colleagues from Hale Industries, including Linda Chen and the teammates who'd supported Ethan through the restructuring, Margaret Oakes and the board members who'd voted with them, Emma and her family, of course, some of Lily's friends from school and their parents, and a handful of Victoria's childhood friends who'd stayed in touch despite her years of self-imposed isolation. Morrison wasn't invited. Neither were the executives who'd made snide comments about their relationship. This was their day, and they filled it only with people who'd earned the right to be there. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of cake tastings and flower selections and debates about whether a string quartet was too pretentious. Ethan watched Victoria navigate wedding planning with the same strategic precision she brought to board meetings, except now she was smiling more, laughing at herself when she got too intense about centerpiece arrangements. "I'm being ridiculous, aren't I?" she'd said one evening after spending 45 minutes comparing fabric swatches. "A little," Ethan admitted, "but it's adorable. I just want it to be perfect." It will be, because we'll be there. Work continued to evolve for both of them. Victoria officially took on the board chair role, and true to her word, she promoted her most trusted VP to COO. The transition freed up her schedule in ways she'd never experienced before. She made it to Lily's science fair, where Lily won second place for her project on solar system formation. She had dinner ready when Ethan got home more often than not. She started joining the weekend soccer games, cheering from the sidelines with the other parents. Ethan's aerospace project led to an industry award and invitations to speak at 3 engineering conferences. He accepted one, bringing Victoria and Lily along and turning it into a family trip. Watching Lily's face light up at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum made every late night and weekend work session worth it. At the office, the dynamic had settled into something comfortable. People stopped whispering about favoritism when project after project delivered results. The new managers Victoria had promoted created a culture where merit actually mattered, where innovative ideas were heard regardless of who proposed them. Turnover decreased. Morale increased. Profits hit record highs. Morrison remained on the board, diminished but not defeated, occasionally making veiled comments about unconventional leadership choices. Victoria ignored him with the kind of gracious professionalism that made his bitterness look petty in comparison. Eventually, he stopped trying. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and longer days and a wedding that felt both surreal and inevitable. The night before, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood on the back porch at 2 a.m, looking at the stars, talking to Sarah the way he sometimes still did when the house was quiet. "I hope you'd be happy for me," he whispered to the darkness. "I hope you'd like her. I think you would. She makes Lily laugh. She makes me feel like it's okay to keep going. I'll always love you. That doesn't change. But I love her too. And I think there's room for both of those truths." The stars offered no answer, but the peaceful silence felt like permission. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, perfect June weather. Ethan dressed in his childhood bedroom at Emma's house, his hands shaking as he tied his tie. Emma had to redo it twice before he got it right. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified. What if I mess up my vows? What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if—" "Ethan." Emma gripped his shoulders. "She already said yes. Everything else is just details." Lily burst in wearing her flower girl dress, pale pink with silver embroidery, exactly what she'd insisted on. "Dad, you look so fancy. Victoria's going to cry when she sees you." "In a good way, I hope." "The best way. Come on, we have to go. Aunt Emma says we can't be late to your own wedding." The garden venue was more beautiful than Ethan had imagined. White chairs arranged in rows, an arch covered in climbing roses, soft music floating through the air. Guests were already seated, faces turning as he walked to his position at the altar. Then the music changed, and everyone stood. Lily came first, scattering rose petals with great seriousness, her face set in concentration. She reached the front and gave Ethan a thumbs up, making several guests laugh. Then Victoria appeared. She wore a simple ivory dress that somehow looked both elegant and understated, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. But it was her expression that stopped Ethan's breath, the pure, unguarded joy on her face as she walked toward him, not crying yet, but close. She'd chosen to walk alone, no father to give her away, just her own choice carrying her forward. When she reached Ethan, she took his hands, and he felt them trembling. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he whispered back. The officiant began, but Ethan barely heard the words. He was too focused on Victoria's face, on the way the sunlight caught in her hair, on the absolute certainty in her eyes when she said her vows. "I promise to love you in both the big moments and the small ones," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I promise to choose us, every day, even when it's hard. I promise to be present for you and for Lily, to build a life that matters more than any career achievement. I promise to stay, not because it's easy, but because you're worth it." When it was Ethan's turn, his carefully prepared vows flew out of his head. Instead, he spoke from the heart. "I was broken when you found me. I'd convinced myself that the best parts of my life were behind me, that all I could do was survive for Lily's sake. You showed me I was wrong. You taught me that it's possible to honor what I've lost while still opening my heart to what I've found." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to build a life with you where love isn't a sacrifice, where success means coming home to the people who matter, where happiness isn't something we achieve but something we create together every single day." The officiant pronounced them married, and Ethan kissed his wife as applause erupted around them. Victoria laughed against his lips, and he felt her tears on his cheeks, or maybe they were his own. They walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, and Lily ran up to walk between them, each of them holding one of her hands. The photo the photographer caught in that moment, the three of them laughing, Lily beaming, sunlight streaming through the trees, would become Ethan's favorite picture ever taken. The reception was everything a wedding should be. Good food, better music, dancing that lasted until the stars came out. Ethan's first dance with Victoria was to a song about second chances, and he held her close, marveling that this brilliant, beautiful woman had chosen him. Later, he danced with Lily, lifting her onto his feet the way he had when she was tiny, spinning her around until she giggled breathlessly. "Are you happy, Daddy?" she asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again." "Good. Mommy would be happy too. I think she sent Victoria to us." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, Ladybug. I think maybe she did." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan found himself standing with Victoria at the edge of the garden, watching the last of the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Mrs. Cole," he said, testing out the name. "I'm keeping Hale at work," Victoria reminded him. "But yes, Mrs. Cole in every other context. I like how it sounds." "Me too." She leaned into him and they stood there together, not needing words. Behind them, Lily was showing her friends how to catch fireflies in the growing dusk. The caterers were cleaning up. Emma was directing the teardown with her usual efficiency. Everything was winding down, but for Ethan and Victoria, everything was just beginning. "I can't believe we're actually married," Victoria murmured. "Having regrets already?" "Not even a little. I'm just grateful for all of it, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They're what made this mean something." Victoria pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining in the fading light. "I love you, Ethan Cole." "I love you too, Victoria Hale Cole." She laughed. "That's quite a mouthful." "You'll get used to it." They stayed until the last guest left, until Lily was yawning so hard she could barely stand, until the venue staff gently informed them they needed to close up. Then they drove home, not to Ethan's house or Victoria's old penthouse, but to their house, the place they'd built together from broken pieces and second chances. Emma had taken Lily for the night, giving them the house to themselves. They walked through the door as husband and wife for the first time, and Ethan swept Victoria into his arms, carrying her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "This is so cliché," she said, her arms around his neck. "Some clichés exist for a reason." He set her down in the living room, and they stood there, taking in the space that held so much of their story. The couch, where they'd had their first real conversation about the board meeting. The kitchen where Victoria had learned to make breakfast without burning anything. The photos on the mantel, Sarah's picture still there, honored and remembered, now joined by new photos of the three of them at the park, at Lily's birthday, at the beach. "I'm glad we didn't change everything," Victoria said softly. "I'm glad Sarah still has a place here. She's part of our story. She always will be." "Do you think she'd forgive me for taking such good care of her family?" Ethan pulled Victoria close. "I think she'd thank you, and I think she'd love you for loving Lily the way you do." They spent their wedding night talking until late, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans for their future. A vacation that summer, just the three of them. Maybe starting to look at bigger houses, places where Lily could have a real yard to play in. Conversations about whether they wanted to give Lily a sibling, a question that felt less terrifying now that they'd proven they could build a family together. "I never thought I'd want kids," Victoria admitted. "But watching you with Lily, being part of her life, I think I might want that, someday." "No pressure. We've got time to figure it out." "I know, but I like that it's a possibility, that we get to choose our future together." Eventually, they fell asleep tangled together, the house quiet and peaceful around them. The months that followed settled into a rhythm that felt like the life Ethan had always wanted but never believed he could have. Victoria thrived in her new role as board chair, implementing changes that made Hale Industries a model for other companies. She won awards, gave keynote speeches, and became known for proving that success and humanity weren't mutually exclusive. But she never missed Lily's soccer games, never worked through dinner unless absolutely necessary, never let the job consume her the way it once had. Ethan's career continued its upward trajectory. He was promoted again, this time to VP of Engineering Innovation, a position that came with its own team and budget and the freedom to pursue the kind of projects he'd only dreamed about before. The whispers about favoritism were long gone, replaced by respect for the work he'd done and continued to do. At home, they became the family none of them had planned, but all of them needed. Lily started calling Victoria V as a nickname, something between formal and familial that felt just right. They established traditions: Sunday pancakes, Friday movie nights, the annual camping trip that Victoria pretended to hate but secretly loved. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding, Ethan came home to find Victoria and Lily in the backyard, lying on a blanket and looking up at the stars. He grabbed a jacket and joined them, settling between his daughter and his wife. "What are we looking at?" he asked. "Orion," Lily said, pointing. "V is teaching me about the constellations. Did you know Betelgeuse might explode into a supernova?" "I did not know that." "It's true. It's already a red supergiant, which means it's near the end of its life cycle. When it goes, it'll be bright enough to see during the day for weeks." Victoria smiled. "She's already surpassed my knowledge. I'm just here for moral support now." They lay there together, the three of them, looking up at the infinite expanse of stars. Ethan thought about the night he'd stood on this same spot, alone and grieving, unable to imagine a future that didn't hurt. He thought about Victoria crying in a restaurant, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. He thought about Lily, who'd been so small and scared when Sarah died, and who now lay between them telling stories about dying stars with confidence and joy. "I'm happy," Lily announced suddenly. "Like, really happy. Are you guys happy too?" "The happiest," Victoria said. "Yeah, Ladybug," Ethan added. "The happiest." And it was true. Not because everything was perfect. It never would be. Victoria still worked too much sometimes. Ethan still had moments when grief caught him off guard. Lily still had nightmares about losing another parent. They still argued about dishes and schedules and whose turn it was to handle the grocery shopping. But they were happy. Happy in the messy, complicated, fully lived way that meant something real. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient light from distant suns reaching across the void. And beneath them, a family that shouldn't have existed, built from chance encounters and blind dates, and people brave enough to choose love over fear, lay together in perfect, imperfect peace. Ethan reached over and took Victoria's hand, felt her squeeze back, felt Lily's small hand find his other one. 3 people, 3 separate stories of loss and loneliness and pain, now woven together into something stronger than any of them could have built alone. This was what Sarah had wanted for him. This was what Victoria's father would have hoped for her. This was what Lily deserved: a life fully lived, a love fully chosen, a family fully present. And somewhere in the space between the stars and the earth, between the past and the future, between everything they'd lost and everything they'd found, 3 hearts beat in synchronized rhythm, writing a story that would never appear in corporate newsletters or achievement lists or any measure of success the world recognized. But it was the story that mattered most. It was theirs, and it was complete.